The will has to be there from top and say that from this particular date we are going digital and you have to fall in line.
Digitization, because that gets rid of a lot of this nonsense in the hands of an individual. The e-way really will help manage a lot of that and improve efficiency also.
If it is a digitization of courts, that you have to bring the court staff on board. Unless you bring them on board, people will not implement it at ground level.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another in our interview series, Shared Values, partnering with Reshape Europe 2022. And in this series, the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom Sri Lanka office, in partnership with EconomyNext, is looking at shared values between the European Union and Sri Lanka, and how we can build on those shared values to create a more prosperous future for our country. I cannot be more delighted to have three parties that are critical components of the legal profession in this country talk about the issues at hand. I'll have great pleasure in introducing the three of them. First, we have Ali Sabry, President's Counsel, who had a long and lucrative career in law before taking up politics, and served as Minister of Justice, Finance, and also currently as Minister of Foreign Affairs. I have with me also Saliya Pieris, President's Counsel, and also President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Again, a long and lucrative career in the legal profession. Ayomi Aluwihare heads FJ Saram, and it's a 82-year-old firm. Also a specialist in commercial law in this country as well, so very relevant to our conversation. Welcome, Ayomi. I'm going to start off with you, Sabry. When you took over as Minister of Justice, you looked at reforming over 100 laws that were not updated for 100 years. I think investors constantly talk about these delays in our legal system as being an impediment for them to choose Sri Lanka as a destination for investment. How do we get, how do we overcome this, and what are the progress of those reforms that you had initiated a few years back?
Yeah, thank you, Imran, for having us. As you correctly pointed out, when we took over, I think we always had a good independent judiciary. There are no two words about it, comparatively in the region and all those things. But functionality of it, effectiveness of it always had been debatable. So, we were always taking up a couple of these emblematic cases and says that this is how strong our judiciary is. But on the ground, loss delays had been a perennial problem. Somebody was telling me when he took over 60 years ago also, the issue was that. When I took over also, I saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, several of reports, World Bank funded, several people funded, all those were there. But no concrete action had been taken. So everybody knew what were the problem. And most of them knew also what were the solutions too. So what was lacking? A coherent program as to how you come out with these reforms on a consistent basis. So then immediately when I took over, because of my knowledge as a lawyer, yes, and a practitioner, and also being in the Bar Association, sometimes I was actively involved in that. As a result of which I knew and I could always rely on my colleagues from the profession. So we kind of devolved a mechanism where we got about 5 subcommittees appointed. I understood the lack of lack of judges, lack of courthouses. We have not kind of brought the technology in, and our laws are outdated. So in view of that, we identified this area in a holistic plan. I made a presentation to the cabinet in terms of which we identified 5 areas. The infrastructure development, digitalization of the courthouses, criminal law reforms, civil law reforms, and commercial law reforms. So for example, digitalization had been there on the card for the last 7-8 years. About 5 years, the money has come for digitalization from the treasury, 500 million, and gone back without doing anything. But we managed to get everything in, and we had a very interesting and a very comprehensive program for that. We got all the experts to come in. We established a subcommittee, went through the whole process, which took about 1.5 years almost. Unfortunately, once we awarded it, we don't have the money right now to $20 million for the digitalization of the whole Sri Lankan courts, which will start with about 100 courts. So that is where we are, but digitalization is the forefront of the changes we were looking at it. And then during the period of COVID, the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and some of the other courthouses were proactively engaged in that. But I would say the judiciary could have done a little more than that. JSC would have taken a more proactive act. And lawyers were also, some of them, though they are our colleagues, was not very technically savvy or not willing to go through that process. That's one side of it. The other reforms were, we established these subcommittees. Through the subcommittees, identified those laws which need to be reformed, and experts from those areas were handpicked and they were given the task to developing it. For example, I saw last week they have gazetted 4 laws in relation to the notaries, notary, power of attorney ordinance, notary ordinance, and all those things. So likewise, we have almost touched upon 99 laws. Some of those things are very interesting. I hope that you will see it. For example, I'll just say that we are introducing 2 courthouses. One is a small claim court.
Yes.
So anything less than $1 million, $10,000, without going through this cumbersome process, like in many other countries, document-based kind of thing. So small claim court, we are trying to introduce that.
Excellent.
And then the pre-trial procedure is totally overlooked at it, rather than overhauled it. And then we are on the process of introducing pre-trial court. So just like in other countries and all those things. And something called an investor court, that is anything above 100 million. So if it is an investment based, whether local or international, day-to-day hearing and things like that. So there are issues that we have done. For example, we increased the cadre in the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and also magistrates. So unfortunately, these economic troubles totally unforeseen, the extent of it. So everything had come to a standstill. But I'm sure so many of those reforms in terms of laws reforms should go through. I think I have gone to, Cabinet Secretary told me last time, 82 new laws have gone to the Cabinet level. With also, that means either asking the permission to draft or reforms, all those things. Apart from that, there is another group of laws which have been looked at it, not gone to the Cabinet for official thing. So if you look at that overhaul is very important. That is the number of judges, number of courthouses, and the digitalization and laws reforms. So with that, unless a holistic view is taken and you approach that in that way, you can't significantly improve the system. So that is where we are lacking. So it is in that sense that I feel that this is a part of the reform which is necessary, country's economy, and also for the rule of law. Where the rule of law, if you can't get your house back after giving on rent for 6 months, then you have to litigate for 10 years.
Absolutely.
So, and for example, one law we are introducing is that the leasehold right recovery process. That is just like the debt recovery. You go to courts, you file a summary procedure. They have to come and show you course, otherwise directly summary the decree nisi will be given absolute. So idea is within 6 months to 12 months, you should be able to recover a property which now take 15 years or so.
Absolutely.
So, but none of those things could be successful unless there is a paradigm shift on the part of the lawyers and the judiciary and government itself, and ultimately the public. So I think some meaningful steps have been taken, but it is for all of us to take it forward to the next level.
Excellent. Some very ambitious plans indeed. Saliya, so he's talking about you now when you say the profession, paradigm shifts are required. What is the Bar Association doing in terms of, equipping their members, to undertake that paradigm?
Yes, of course, I think one of the key areas is on legal education, and we continuing legal education. And what we have seen is so far continuing legal education has been fairly ad hoc. So one thing we are trying to do is to propose to establish CPD, continuing professional development, as in
many other professions.
Other professions. Of course, there are challenges. Not everyone in certain countries you have to have certain CPD points in order to renew your license. And over the years, we have not been used to that. So once you take oaths, you are there
Lawyer for life.
Lawyer for life, and there is no legal requirement on updating yourself. So we have constituted a committee, and we are trying to go ahead and of course, ultimately the decisions have to be with the Supreme Court.
Of course,
they will have to make rules for that purpose. But we are looking at a more structured way. Already we have a district-wise continuing legal education program which we have put in place, and that is one aspect. The other aspect, of course, which we propose to do is to look at the changes which are coming in the future. So, for instance, in relation to the port city.
Right.
Of course, another area which has been neglected, or very few lawyers are involved, is on like the securities markets.
Of course.
And so those are areas, I think, unfortunately, our legal education is also not needs more progress. And that is where I think law college, but also the universities have to change. And so these are areas where we would like to change. But essentially, where the Bar Association is concerned, we are trying to focus on the CPD and the continuing legal education.
Excellent. I think individual responsibility is very important to progress, right? If you're an accountant, you have no choice. If you don't do your CPD, you don't have. Yeah, continue. Yes.
That's right. But of course, now what happens is you have. It is not as if no one updates themselves. Exactly. There are so many lawyers who are updated. But the only thing, there is no regulatory mechanism in place to ensure that they do update themselves. So, of course, you must also remember that it is the Bar Association is not the regulatory body.
Absolutely, yes.
The regulatory body is the Supreme Court. And but we are a professional association, and certainly we liaise with the Supreme Court on many of many issues. So we would be in a position to make recommendations, but of course it is ultimately the Supreme Court which would have to establish a framework for that purpose.
Excellent. I think we'll come to both of the topics that we spoke about before, but there's one thing that investors always talk about, Ayomi, and that is about contractual enforcement in Sri Lanka and how long cases taken. I think Sabry referred to that as well. Is there anything that we can do to make this more faster, create more predictability in terms of contract enforcement that we can discuss?
Picking really from thoughts from those already expressed, but it's a wide area. You could talk about the infrastructure, you can talk about the delays, you can talk about the backlog and so on, but I want to focus on 2 points. One is that, again, something similar to what Saliya said, is I've seen recently judges go through 2 programs, arbitration training, where they got the benefit of foreign expertise. And I saw the almost immediate use of that knowledge.
Excellent.
In court. Mm-hmm. So I think that knowledge upgrade, we were talking about lawyers, Saliya, but even for judges,
absolutely,
it'll be invaluable. And we're talking about future proofing. So to have a program like in other jurisdictions where the judges have accreditation and regular requirement to upgrade their knowledge, I think a program setup would be invaluable in looking for the consistency, trust building in enforcement, uniformity, and so on. So that's one point. Arbitration, we know we've had a law for a long time. It's based on UNCITRAL. We have an arbitration center or centers in Colombo. Another area, and again relevant to this discussion, is mediation, commercial mediation. Sri Lanka was one of the first signatories to the Singapore Convention, which is the Commercial Mediation Convention. We are yet to bring and enforce that convention into law here, but it can be done. And if it is done, the results in Singapore are really heartening. So most commercial disputes need to go into mediation. 75% of the disputes that go into mediation are settled. Excellent. So that has the result of releasing and freeing, at least for commercial disputes and enforcement of contracts, some space for the matters of enforcement that go into court. So I think those two areas, we have the groundwork already. We've signed the convention. I think we can do the next bit of work, which is to have the law in place, train mediators. We do have accredited mediators in Sri Lanka already, and there is a process where there is training going on. So I think that would help in bettering our enforcement of contracts.
Excellent. I think we have the stakeholders who can push that through. I don't think there's any dispute in Parliament about this either. So it's a matter of finding the schedule in Parliament to go ahead. And I think that's heartening to know that there is a mechanism that goes out of the court system and frees up resources in the court system. Jurisdictions like Singapore have used it. I think definitely we can apply it here as well. But I want to come back to something that Sabry was talking about, and I think has been a solution in many parts of the world, which is digitization. And digitization goes beyond, not just virtual court hearings or having documentation or even e-filing, but it also goes into like scheduling, right? Where automatically you can schedule between the counsels and the judge hearings, payment of court filing fees, judgments coming out. So are we looking at that aspect as well in the whole digitization process?
Yeah, digitalization process was a very comprehensive one. The conceptualization took us 8 to 9 months, and we got a expert to come and advise us on that. Leading Sri Lankan audit company, which has a consultancy. They were a consultant, and then we got the JSC to come in, and our technology committee got involved in that. The ministry got involved in that and studied several of those models which are working well. I think ultimately it was awarded to a consortium. One of them is the current Malaysian technology provider, the Malaysian court, which is understood as a very effective one. So that those things are there. So that include this holistic upgrade of the whole system, scheduling, e-filing, e-hearing, oral submissions. So all those things are possible. Some of those things have. It's also depend on how you take it. When I was there, I brought that the COVID Special Provisions Act, which enabled online hearing and all those things. When I went to Trincomalee, I was Trincomalee. One of the lawyers sent me a judge in Trincomalee. When the Colombo judges are reluctant sometimes, judge in Trincomalee gave 1 day to a witness from states in then I can't travel. Okay, I'll give you one more thing. If you come or you can't come, you make arrangement. This provision is there. Testify online. And he did. So for 10 years or so, he couldn't come. So it's also the mechanism is available, just that you need to take the initiative also. And then those lawyers were saying, he testified from United States. He was cross-examined, and it was done and dusted on that particular day. And they are moving to the next chapter. So this is all possible. But unfortunately, this economic trouble had put a halt to all our plans as far as that is concerned. But I'm sure that from whatever the point onwards, we need to take it forward. That's very, very important. One thing what I did was this consultant to look at the concept was there, and he had done some work. I didn't want to come and send them back and start from zero.
Right.
I started from that point onward, because that has been done for the used our funds and for the government of Sri Lanka.
Exactly.
So we continued that. So it has come to a position. So my only expectation is that whenever we can afford, that will go on from that point onwards and issue. Award that tender and go ahead with it. So because it is tested in some other jurisdiction whom we are aspiring to be, probably. So that is how we did, because ultimately it was brought down to 2 vendors. One was, I think, Singaporean, the model, which is now is very expensive, but this model was more affordable to us. So technically they were all equally equal almost, but on the pricing, I think they chose the Malaysian model. So that's a comprehensive model.
Excellent. Saliya, are your members ready for the full?
I think I think members, especially the younger members,
Yes.
I think would be ready. Of course, there may be a gap between the more senior members of the profession and others. And well, even for ourselves, sometimes we still find it easier to have a file, and we prefer to read a book rather than the digital version. But having said that, I think now the little which we have done so far, insofar as the digitization of court, Zoom hearings, something has happened. But of course, again, there has to be initiative and also leadership. You have to get it going, because I think I have heard about the Malaysian example. Some of the senior lawyers in Malaysia told me, they said during the COVID period, they simply went digital, and they said from this day we are hearing cases virtually, and that's it. So then people have to adjust. So I think the example is given, I think in Dubai, when Dubai, one of the Middle Eastern country, where they decided to go paperless. They say at one point, the government decided from this day we are going paperless, and then
no choice.
No choice. So sometimes, of course, there would be. I mean, I do think that certain things have to be gradual, but maybe you have to set timelines and start doing it, because if you wait, what I feel is if you wait for everything to fall into place, then things might not happen.
True.
So we know that the crisis is the economic crisis for all of us. With COVID, there was a court stopped. My personal view was, even for COVID, my view was that courts should not stop. So, but when the COVID started, for about 2 months, we were virtually, none of the courts functioned, except for the few magistrates' courts. But I think there are lessons to be learned. So even now, about 2 weeks ago, due to the fuel situation, again, there was most of the courts stopped. And from our side, from the Bar Association side, we were urging the courts to somehow to function. And and then, of course, in certain places where some of the digital facilities were available, certain courts tried to go online. But what I want to say is, if you also need to have the will to do it.
Absolutely.
And that is so very important. And all the stakeholders must have that will.
And I think there are like workarounds. For example, in other parts of the world, when you have senior practitioners who don't know technology, what they do is they pair them up with younger, people who are in law college and or university who know technology, and there's a transference of knowledge and a mutual, assistance to each other. That is one solution.
We're planning something similar. Like we were talking to Bar Association, and we wanted to get the Bar Association and particularly the apprentices and the interns to come and help them. So that we had a plan to do that. Right now we are doing it for the full the registration of QR code. We have got the youth code. And the members of the youth council assign 5-6 of them to each the full station, and help them to get themselves registered and train them and all those things. It's possible, but as you say, the will has to be there from top, and say that from this particular date we are going digital, and you have to fall in line. And talking about myself, I always had this huge the question mark about using the online banking, but COVID forced us, and I don't think I have
you can live without it now.
the check thereafter, so it's all possible. It's just that somebody has to take that leadership and give a deadline and say that from this point onwards, here it is, give a little bit of a leeway and labor training and all those things. But if there is the will, there is the way,
I think our banking sector is a good example where the change has happened quite rapidly. And another very good example is the passport office. We know that in the 1990s, the passport office was not so methodical.
Absolutely.
But within about 4 or 5 years, everything changed, and today it runs. It's pretty good. It runs efficiently.
Even customs, we are almost paperless now. Now the problem was customs started it, and we all thought the biggest problem will be from the wharf. No, they also got into that. Then we thought that the importers and exporters, they were also ready. Banks were not ready to take some of those things. And then we had to push the bank. So we thought the bank will be the first person to go, the first ingredients to go and say that we are ready to do that.
Yeah.
But it worked the other way around. The wharfs were ready, the importers and exporters were ready, and with so much of difficulty, customs were ready, ultimately to take that paperless payment system and all those things. Now it's working. So it's possible. It's just possible. It's just that somebody need to take that initiative.
And talking about the initiative, actually, there's a very good example from your ministry now. So the Sri Lankan consulate in Melbourne, Victoria had the biggest lockdowns in the whole world. Right, they couldn't leave for anything. So the staff decided, okay, now there are a lot of Sri Lankans in Victoria. We need to do something about it. So they decided to find an automated solution. Right, so there was a government procurement processes, and they found a vendor from Sri Lanka, a young firm with Kalaniya University graduates. And the system, they actually ended up giving it free because as a service to the country. And that system has basically removed so many delays in the council. You don't stay on queues anymore. You fill most of the application information beforehand. A fully digitized consulate has statistics. They showed me the system, and we hope that the ministry will deploy it in all the Sri Lankan embassies. Just because that Consul General and the consul staff just decided we are going to do something about it, rather than put up with the delays, because the Sri Lankans there did not want to be inconvenienced. I think initiative is important. Yes, Ayomi,
yeah, I suppose this can be seen as an opportunity when the economic crisis, and I think the Bar Association is right in saying go to court. We've seen a number of international arbitrations at the firm where you have witnesses in one place, lawyers in another place, and they have functioned well. We have had some of those arbitrations where we in Sri Lanka are really driving and organizing the IT side of it.
Excellent.
And at the firm, we are not particularly IT savvy, but the resources are available in the country. And I think you just, as you all have all said, you have to do it. You were mentioning about sort of a overarching effort to look at digitizing. I think there's also much to be done on a sort of more localized level also. For example, the land registries. If you just look at one aspect, that is the registration of the movable mortgages. Now, we have no means by which, when we are asked, is a movable asset mortgage, we have no means of saying yes or no, because the registry is not digitized. So perhaps there is also scope for looking at small local projects that can actually be very meaningful. To be able to say a mobile asset is actually secured or not secured would be invaluable. Likewise, for all of us, if you ask us for a law, and it has to be an official version of the law, our official version of the legislative enactment is 1956. So if a normal man on the road wants to look up a law, yes, they can Google it and look for a PDF, but an official version is not available. There are private versions. So again, another localized effort perhaps could be an official version of all of the laws, and not only the laws, but the regulations also. That is, in one database, searchable, upgraded. So I think we can also look at, whilst we are looking at an overarching broader digital development, also smaller localized efforts that would have far-reaching benefits, again, because we are talking about future-proofing.
I think that's excellent suggestion. I think that.
But one thing I feel is that you all also have to deregulate. I think we have too much of regulation, so that on simple things. So, for example, in courts, if you want to get a certified copy, if you make a payment today, you can't get the copy until the next day. Now, there is no logic to it. But that is how it is. So, you make the payment at 3 o'clock, you are told to come to the next day. So, we have to also, I think, look at things where officials also try to simplify matters, and rather than complicate.
Now, for example, one of the biggest problem that we have is in courthouses, the productions. Now, if you go to a particular court, for example, Kandy, the whole courthouse and the surrounding and everywhere, those things are just lying there, nothing has happened. But if you go little away to Gampala, not a single one. is all about the approach of the judge, So if laws are there, procedure is there, he find a way, he find a time, and he have disposed of. Here they will come and say 101 excuses, why can't I do this, this is there. So it's at the end of the day, what happens is also the individuals.
Absolutely.
Until a system is there.
Absolutely.
So once a system is foolproof and everybody doing the same thing, and we have trained the judges and all those things, some of them are giving that leadership. For example, during the COVID period, the Mount Leonia court was perfectly working. So the lawyers there and the Bar Association branch there took leadership. And very proactive judges were there. They convinced them. They were seamlessly working. So a lot of people wanted to kind of adopt that, So then others want to follow that. So it's also, but local small things have to take wherever initiative. I'm with Ayomi on that. Wherever initiative can take, you must take it. But until some overarching effort is made, decisions are made at the JSC level, ministry level, Bar Association getting involved in that, I don't think there will be a complete transformation taking place. So that has to go there. All these small efforts will help towards that.
Absolutely. Saliya, I want to come to another aspect that in addition to delays and the reforms and the digitization, that's the access to justice. And the cost of litigation is quite high. And obviously because of time, delays, it pulls up. So unless you really have a lot of money or extremely patient, you can't really see a case through. How do we address this issue?
Of course, I think I can speak of one issue is on criminal law. So the access to justice, we have people defending. There are those who are what we call assigned counsel or so on. But there is a gap. We have to consider there is a huge gap because, say, if you're well off, if you have the money, you're better defended. And that is, of course, not only in Sri Lanka.
Yes, it's a global.
Even in the United States, I think that is there, that those who are defended by the public defender might stand less chance than others. So, but having said that, I think we do need to recognize that as almost as a fundamental right, the right to have access to justice. There are no quick fix solutions. So in other countries, there are pro bono where you have there is a duty cast on the profession to accept certain legal aid work. I think it happens unofficially. It does happen. I think
yes.
we have, all of us, we take cases which sometimes we do appear free, but there is no system in that. And of course, the law's delays is, I think, one thing which deprives people of access to justice even.
Of course.
So you take a land case or a partition case, so many years which go to resolve those cases. I think that is something which needs to be addressed, but I see even digitization addressing that, because then the process becomes quicker.
And also the small courts endeavor that you mentioned, the small claims court, even that
will help.
But also, I think one problem is there is a gap between the litigants, their knowledge, and there are certain things I think you really need to simplify the process, so that even unfortunately, if you look at a lot of our courts, we are centered on either the judge or the lawyers. But I think you really need to center on the litigant. So if you come to Hulstorf, an ordinary litigant, you will not be able to find their way even within the courts. So whether you have access to facilities, all those. I think this is where we really need to make it. And I think in the long term, it's better for the legal profession.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's better
exactly.
that when there is great access to justice, when cases are heard, disposed of quicker, I think there will be more work.
Absolutely. And we have a better society.
That is right.
Some other countries have tied the CPD had been tied with the legal aid.
Little bit of legal aid, yes.
Legal aid. So you have to indulge in that.
Absolutely.
For you to get your points and all those things. So that probably is one thing on the medium to longer term. So we have to slowly introduce that. So everyone has to do some sort of a legal aid work and becomes a pride on that. So that's important. Otherwise, today we have a legal aid commission, but it's only certain kind of work goes there. Is whether it's so it is effective enough or comparable to the Western or the advanced countries is an issue in points. That's where the issue is.
I mean, this another aspect that concerns investors is about property rights, and that's something I want to talk to you about. Property right includes things like land, intellectual property rights, which you don't talk about as well. Going forward, how do we create mechanisms to protect property rights and create a culture of respecting property rights?
So on the legal framework, firstly, on intellectual property, we have a fairly good legal framework. Certainly for efficiency, there can be digitization on e-filing and things like that, which is fairly obvious. On the land, which is an important property and rights in land is important. We have had in Title Registration Act of 1998. So it's almost 25 years almost. That is long overdue. Right. So the legal framework is in place, but there's a lot of work to be done to give effect to the title registration. And it's a question we get every time an investor comes into Sri Lanka. How can I be sure that I own this land? So we have a process by which we trace a chain of title, right. Not ideal. So I think it is a must that the title registration law is given effect to. I understand, and perhaps former minister can comment, that a lot of work had to be done. The whole project has come to a standstill due to a lack of infrastructure. So I think in the next 2-3 years again, this can be an opportunity in a way, because a lot of economic activity has slowed down. So perhaps focus can be, if the resources are available, on something like this. We were advising on the Colombo Port City, and one of the pieces of one of the opinions we gave is Port City is a fairly
self-contained,
and its ownership is not an issue. So you can quite easily get it into the title registration system. We have a lot of public land in and around the country. You might want to say, for example, have a solar power project, a floating solar power. Yes. And you need to know who owns the water. Yeah, who owns the water. So there are different aspects of title registration, but the public lands can be dealt with separately and registered. And as I said, the legal framework is there. We just have to give effect to it. And I think that is so in most instances. The legal framework is there. It's the effectiveness that we have to really focus on.
Interesting. So one aspect that I've done a little bit of discussions with the profession and everybody, investors and so on. So one of the things that keep coming up is that the most corrupt and most inefficient parts of the legal system, the registrar's offices. It is in the court system or it is the land system. How do you reform this? Because they are a law unto its own, I'm told.
Digitization.
Yeah, it's a digitization.
Because that gets rid of a lot of this nonsense in the hands of an individual. So actually, if you the e-way really will help manage a lot of that. Yep. and improve efficiency also. That's my non-counsel. These are litigators here. This is the non-litigator view.
No, that's correct, I think. So the more you get rid of more hands going through a process, human touch is taken away. It's straightforward, So it's and we have seen that in customs already to a great extent, but there is separate challenges there. But if you look at now, what I understand in a system like in Singapore, you don't wait till the building approval comes for you to start construction.
Yes.
So you submit the application, you start construction. But by the time, if they find that your application is wrong or something, the architect will be held liable, so that you don't. So here, approval process take 2-3 years.
Yes.
Now, I know people are willing to pay 25-30% more for the land with the approval without the. So these issues are there on the long but digitalization is very key on those areas, and there are private projects which were pilot projects we started even in the land registry and the registrar of companies, and we have put a team to overlook at it. For example, Nihal Fernando, President's Council, is overlooking the digitalization process of the registrar, the company registrar's office. So
Yeah, actually, it's largely we do e-filings now. We can do an e-search.
yeah, so it's possible. It's
Yeah.
not possible. It's not. So it is possible. We can. Of course, we need to. There are a lot of work to be done. But then I think people are now, particularly the younger generation, they have seen this and they are very tech savvy. So therefore, they would like to do this. You know, I think none of my juniors, though I am going through this, they all of them have in their laptops and iPads all the cases reference. Within a second, they will find and give me the reference cases. Then rather than I go through my old civil procedure code. So this is a good opportunity. I think we can transform this into a different level.
But I also think one of the key issues is the corruption.
Yes.
And while digitization can address it,
We cannot eliminate it.
the problem is, I think you will find within so this is why I said even about the digitization, that you have to bring the court staff on board. If it is a digitization of courts, unless you bring them on board, you will find that you know when then what will happen is people will not implement it at ground level. So of course, but I think it is worth studying how it was done in a place like the passport office and how things were. Because if I remember in the 80s and 90s, the passport offices were quite corrupt places. And how did that change? Digitization probably helped in it. And of course, I always think whether you should also give people incentives, make officially. So if they meet certain targets, you pay incentives, but make that official. While you clamp down on bribery, you also see that, or you have so for example, to execute a decree, you have a 24-hour process to execute a decree, but you have a fast track method where perhaps officially the person pays more.
As we do with the passport.
As we do with the passport. So in that way, then out of that you pay a portion. But of course, you do need to also deal with and punish people for corruption.
Carrot and stick approach.
Yes, I think without that it would be difficult.
Excellent. I think we are running out of time, but I from the start of this conversation to the end, I think if you are an investor or someone who's very interested in our future of our legal profession, you should be very, very positive and optimistic, because I think a lot of initiatives are underway. It's a matter of COVID and then the economic crisis has sort of slowed them down, but doesn't mean that they will not happen. So on behalf of the Fidik Nauman Foundation for Freedom and EconomyNext, let me thank you, Sabry, Saliya, and Ayomi, for your time. And I think the insights that you gave us will inform many generations of lawyers and investors while looking into investing in this country and making a very prosperous country in the future. Thank you.